Chapter 209. Then please hold on to me tightly, so that I can be loyal to you one day. Jingwan said as she unconsciously reached out to stroke the hair on the back of Li Hongyuan's head. After saying this, she was actually a bit lost in thought. She didn't know why she said such a thing. In this world where men were superior to women, a married woman should regard her husband as the sky. It was natural for her to be loyal to her husband. It was intolerable for her to be disloyal. If people found out, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she would be condemned by thousands of people. She actually said such a thing, and the other party was a prince who stood at the peak of power and controlled life and death. Women, in their eyes, might not even be as good as a piece of clothing. Jingwan believed that although she didn't live carefully like walking on thin ice, she still paid attention to what she should pay attention to. Even if her words and actions were out of line, it was still within the scope of control. Moreover, the other party was trustworthy and guaranteed that it wouldn't be leaked. Did this also represent her trust in him? Trust, such a simple word. However, whether it was given to others or received from others, sometimes it was easy, sometimes it was very difficult. When it was easy, it might be in a flash, and when it was difficult, it might not be realized in a lifetime. Jingwan reached out to cover her eyes. Sure enough, she was no exception. She would also be hit by the sugar-coated bullets called indulgence, pampering, and warmth. Although it was impossible for her to completely trust him, she still had a bit of trust in him. Jingwan now faintly understood the madness and decisiveness shown when one was heartlessly abandoned and heartlessly betrayed. Since the monarch is heartless, I will give up. It was easy to say, but it was really easy to do. It probably only showed that one wasn't wholeheartedly devoted. Just like now, she was thinking, if in the future this man promised her the life she wanted and heartlessly destroyed it, she wouldn't be so magnanimous as to let go. But whether it was possible to kill him. Look, she was just a little touched by him now. She was no longer blindly restraining herself from being moved by him. But she could have such thoughts. What about those who were deeply in love? Or was she actually extreme and crazy in her bones? Naturally, he had to hold on to her tightly. Once she was in his hands, how could he give others a chance? After knowing her temperament and the ideal life she wanted, if this could make her favor another man, then he could just slit his own throat. Li Hongyuan looked up, held her hand that was covering her eyes, and moved it away. That flash of ruthlessness made him slightly startled. He lowered his head and gently bit her bloody lips. What are you thinking about? Jingwan probably knew that there was something wrong with the look in her eyes, but she didn't panic. She didn't try to explain or cover up what she had just said. Facing Li Hongyuan, she tilted her head and suddenly smiled like a flower. Murder? Oh. Li Hongyuan was not surprised, let alone frightened. He even asked with great interest, Who? You. Jingwan opened her mouth slightly, but her words were clear. Li Hongyuan frowned slightly, looking a little distressed. Wan, let's make a deal. Did this man think she was joking? Haha. When you really want my life, just tell me. How about it? He probably knew under what circumstances she would want his life. Now that he was thinking about it, it was a good sign. Can I still kill you if I tell you? Isn't this a matter of taking the enemy by surprise and catching them off guard? I am your husband, and also a member of the imperial family. Killing a husband is a capital offense. Assassinating a member of the imperial family will implicate the entire Luo family. So it's not worth it for you to do it yourself. Tell me. I will help you. I guarantee that the final result will satisfy you, and you won't be implicated at all. So whatever you do, you have to leave it to someone who's good at it. Jingwan looked at him in disbelief. Does Wang Ye really know what I'm talking about? What are you talking about? My ears are fine, my ability to understand is fine, and my mouth is fine. Wan, it's fine if you want my life, but there's a condition. Li Hongyuan pointed at her heart. It must completely belong to me. Only your heart can exchange for my life. Do you understand? He didn't seem to be joking at all. Jingwan's breathing stagnated. She suddenly felt a little scared. She twisted her body, as if to avoid the atmosphere that was like a cage. Her eyes wandered, not daring to meet his eyes. She forced a smile. If a person doesn't have a heart, they also don't have a life. A life for a life. I'm still losing out. Li Hongyuan chuckled and pinched Jingwan's chin, making her look at him. Wan, if you want to pretend to be confused, I won't force you. But you must remember what Li Hongyuan said today. Not to mention this life. Even in the next life. As long as you remember it, it will be effective. A heart for a life. You fell in love with him. And he betrayed you. You can take his life. And it's a promise that's not just for one life. It was very heavy, but it also made people look forward to it. Of course, Jingwan wasn't afraid that she couldn't bear it. It's just that, when these words came out of Jin Qinhuang's mouth, it seemed very unreliable. However, his attitude didn't seem to be joking. Li Hongyuan wanted to strike while the iron was hot, and let her understand more things. But in the end, he was afraid that if he pushed too hard, she would shrink back instead. He was even more distressed by her frowning and tangled appearance. In any case, things weren't completely without progress. In fact, this progress had already exceeded his expectations. Her heart wasn't as hard to shake as he expected. But even so, he didn't feel that the road in the future would become easy. He unceremoniously bit her again. You're not allowed to see those two people in the future, understand? All her thoughts turned to nothingness in an instant, but Jingwan couldn't get angry at this time. She was only left with helplessness. Everything's fine. If there's nothing, why would I see them? Don't randomly eat vinegar and go crazy. Flying vinegar and whatnot, she didn't understand, but she could roughly guess. Even if there's something, you can't see them. Don't think that I don't know that those two people have wolfish ambitions for you. If there's really something, they wouldn't come up openly. Today, Chen Jingmin didn't wait for Fu Huang to summon him. He just changed his clothes and came over. It's really an ordinary visit. Why is there a need to be so anxious? What's his intention? It's simply short of announcing it to the world. Sun Yilin looks like a gentleman, but he's also not a good thing. Seeing Li Hongyuan's flustered and exasperated appearance that wanted to kill someone, Jingwan felt very amused. The one who had the least face to say that someone else wasn't a good thing was probably you, Jin Qinhuang. And this image of yours, the subversion is really too serious. It seems a bit childish. Let those people who have been dealt with miserably by you see it. Would they have the thought of being dealt with by such a person? They simply don't have the face to live. Thinking of this, Jingwan couldn't hold back and burst out laughing. Li Hongyuan's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. The hostility in his eyes seemed to congeal into substance. He suddenly turned over and got out of bed. Pulling his clothes over, he started to put them on. This seemed like he was really angry. Jingwan reflected, was she a bit too excessive? She hurriedly sat up, not caring that her clothes and hair were in a mess. She reached out to pull him. What is Wang Ye doing? Li Hongyuan turned back to look at her, his eyes cold and murderous. Doing what? Killing them. Ben Wang really shouldn't have facilitated their marriage with Wan. He should have directly asked his old man to sanction the marriage. Whether he agreed or not, he had to agree. At worst, he would overthrow his throne and cause his brothers to fight for the throne. So what if he started an internal and external war? What did the suffering of the people have to do with him? It would also save him from the pain in his heart, liver and lungs, wishing that he could grind those people's bones and scatter their ashes. Although it wasn't directed at her, Jingwan couldn't help but tremble. She hurriedly stood up to stop him. I was wrong just now. Don't treat people's lives as nothing. Yuan, don't casually kill people. Li Hongyuan's expression became even colder. Are you pleading for them? You even used a term that you only use in bed. Jingwan wanted to curse his mother. How could he twist her meaning like this? However, if she didn't appease him now, Jingwan was really afraid that someone would come to their house to report the deaths tomorrow morning. I didn't mean that. I just thought that if you inexplicably took their lives, no matter how much your imperial father dotes on you, he would definitely blame you. You also offended a lot of your brothers. At this time, they would definitely make things difficult for you. It's hard to say why you killed them. You can't tell the truth. When the time comes, I would be at the center of the storm. Yuan, you wouldn't have the heart to do that, right? It's just killing one or two people. Do you think I'll be caught? Ben Wang isn't trashed to that extent. Bastard, can't you speak properly? Of course, there's nothing you can't do. On the other hand, they're still considered young talents. It's not bad to leave them to work like cattle or horses for Qi Yuan. There are millions of people in Qi Yuan, and there are plenty of young talents. It doesn't make much difference whether they're at it or not. He was determined to kill, wasn't he? Is he still a normal person who wants to kill someone just because of a disagreement? He's definitely sick, the kind that's seriously sick. It's so tiring to meet such a person. Yuan, I have nothing to do with them now. Don't be so narrow-minded, okay? I'm narrow-minded. Li Hongyuan's voice suddenly rose a few octaves. He looked at Jingwan gloomily and sneered. Wan, since you've said so, then I'll just make this title a reality. He didn't even care about his clothes and turned to leave. Jingwan subconsciously reached out and hugged his waist. She just wanted to slap her own mouth. But at least she knew that this person was really narrow-minded. She had to be more careful in the future. She couldn't say anything. I was wrong. How can you be narrow-minded? If that was the case, you would have killed them long ago. Yuan is the most magnanimous. I'm not magnanimous at all. You're right, I'm really narrow-minded. Jingwan wanted to cry. Who could give her some advice? She really didn't know what to do with this man. It was fine if she didn't coax him, but the more she coaxed him, the more it was like adding fuel to the fire. What the hell was this? Jingwan looked up, and he lowered his head to look at her. You're not going to say anything? If you're not going to say anything, then let go. Jingwan gritted her teeth and threw caution to the wind. She let go, quickly wrapped her arms around his neck, tiptoed and kissed him. A certain someone's eyes flashed, but he lowered his head slightly. It would be a waste to reject the benefits that came to him. But that was all. He didn't reach out his hand, didn't kiss back, and firmly told Jingwan his unshakable position. Jingwan rubbed her lips on his for a moment, and used the tip of her nose to rub his chin intimately. As the saying goes, if I don't kill Bo Run will die because of me. Is Yuan really willing to let me bear such a sin? She secretly glanced at him, and his expression seemed to loosen. She continued, moreover, at this time, is it really okay for you to leave me to kill people? She gently rubbed against him. Yuan, I'm so tired of standing on tiptoe. So, she had to quickly grow taller. It was not good to have a big height difference. At the same time, Jingwan heard a crashing sound. It was the sound of her moral integrity breaking. Li Hongyuan narrowed his eyes and reached out to hold her waist, pulling her close to him. He lowered his head and pressed his forehead against hers. Wan's words are reasonable. As the saying goes, killing people is common, but the grace of a beauty is not common. How can we let down something that is not common because of something that is common? He carried Jingwan up and placed her on the bed. This way you won't be tired. Then he pressed his body against hers. With overwhelming enthusiasm, Li Hongyuan's mouth was no less merciful than when he first came in. It was probably because she pleaded for leniency, just now that he was in a bad mood, and wanted to make up for it. Jingwan wondered if she would really be eaten by him tonight. However, if it really came to that point, she might not refuse. Regardless of whether she would fall into his hands in the end, she probably wouldn't have any other man besides him. Jingwan was somewhat unable to endure his hands and mouth, but she suddenly heard him say, "Let them go for tonight, and tomorrow." Jingwan was slow to understand what he meant. Anger rose from her heart and she kicked him. "You still won't let them go? Actually, those two are your true love." Jin Qinhuang's reputation of eating both men and women is like thunder to the ear. If you really can't bear to let them go, then hurry and find them to be lovey-dovey. This miss wants to sleep, so I won't accompany you. Li Hongyuan also knew that if he continued to speak, she would probably turn hostile. He snorted, "Whether or not I eat both men and women, I will definitely let you experience it for yourself." And then on this night, Jingwan indeed experienced it for herself. Gong Mama, who had been kicked out of the room by Li Hongyuan at the beginning, was guarding the door with all her heart. Looking at the dark night sky, she was infinitely melancholy. Wang Yu was clearly taking advantage of the situation to cause trouble, and this miss had foolishly delivered herself to the door. Now that she had been completely eaten, she didn't know how she would be tormented by him in the future. However, Gong Mama also knew that according to this living king of hell's temperament, if she didn't stop him, he would most likely settle those two gongzi tonight. This attitude of wanting to be real and wanting to be fake, according to this Mrs. Temperament, even if she knew what his purpose was, she would still appease him every time. This loss, she had to eat it, even if she didn't want to. Therefore, Jingwan still didn't know that she had stepped on the bitter road of sacrificing her body to protect the peace of the world. Once he was stubborn, she had to appease him. If she didn't appease him, or if she appeased him too slowly, he could do whatever he wanted to do. He would make the heavens angry and people resent him, but they couldn't do anything about him. They could only cry and complain in front of Jingwan. After so many times, Jingwan probably learned to be obedient. Once he showed signs, she would quickly think of a way to extinguish it. It couldn't be better if he didn't torment her to the bed. Even if she did, it was better than waiting for his anger to soar to the extreme. The next day, when it was time, Jingwan didn't get up. However, her maidservants and mamas tacitly didn't wake her up. She had practiced for so long at night, so she didn't need to do it in the morning. A certain someone still left around the same time. He looked refreshed and didn't look like he was tired for half the night. Gong Mama was clearly angry, but she still had to help him freshen up. Fortunately, Sunny Jia didn't come to find her, so Jingwan could sleep until the sun was high up in the sky. In order to prevent irrelevant people from knowing, they just wiped her body after they stopped, and it was a certain prince who personally served her. When Jingwan got up, he fetched water to take a bath. Because it was long past the time for Jingwan to take a bath, he had to find an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. The servants wouldn't talk about the master, but it was difficult to explain to others, especially Madame Luo. Thinking about it, it should be obvious that this routine was suddenly broken. Anyone would have to ask if something had happened. Jingwan's body was denser than any other time, especially on her chest, lower abdomen, lower waist, inner thighs, and other places. It was almost impossible to see the original color of her skin. The maidservants blushed, the wet nurse was helpless, and Gong Mama was even more angry. Even if he had never touched a woman, he didn't need to be so cruel. The girl was still young and delicate. Even if he was a beast, he should know how to take care of her. Time after time, Jingwan had become thick-skinned in this aspect. Even with this appearance, under the gaze of the maidservants, she could still act as usual. She leaned on the edge of the bathtub lazily, and was a little listless. There was no problem with her body. After all, she exercised regularly and her body was very flexible. It was not that she did not exercise for a long time, and would feel sore after a little vigorous exercise. It was just that she did not get enough sleep. Gong Mama was like that. Every time a certain king of hell came, her face would darken. But other than being angry and competing with herself, it probably didn't have any other effect. Jingwan turned around in the water, resting her chin on her folded hands. She smiled faintly and said, "Mama, don't be like this. It doesn't hurt." "Miss, it's not Mama nagging you, but don't indulge Jin Qinwang. This kind of thing, too many times will harm the body. You are still young." She was full of resentment towards Li Hongyuan, and also a little resentful towards Jingwan. Jingwan shrunk her neck imperceptibly. It wasn't just the other party, who was greedy for pleasure. She also had a little bit, just a little bit. Probably in order to cover up her little guilty conscience, Jingwan changed the topic. "Yesterday, Cousin Min came with young Master Sunday. He knew later. Mama, do you think he sent someone to keep an eye on our Luo family's gate?" This time, it was Gong Mama's turn to have a little guilty conscience. However, she didn't send a message to him about yesterday's matter. Originally there was nothing. She was just worried that he would overturn the vinegar jar. As a result, the whereabouts of anyone who had a special relationship with Miss would still attract his attention. She didn't get Gong Mama's answer. Jingwan also didn't insist on getting an answer. How could Mama know about his matter? When Jingwan came out of the water, she wiped the water droplets and applied some ointment that could remove the traces earlier. She put on her clothes, dried her hair, and dressed neatly. No traces could be seen. Even if she met someone with sharp eyes and saw a little clue on her eyebrows, if they didn't think in this direction, it wouldn't arouse suspicion. Jingwan first went to old Madame Luo's place. Old Madame Luo's gaze swept over her body. When Jingwan was a little uncomfortable, she retracted her gaze as if nothing had happened, and chatted as usual. Jingwan spent time here, and didn't have the intention to drive her away. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but Jingwan always felt that grandmother seemed to know about her and Jin Qinhuang's matter. It was only because of her love and tolerance for her that she never exposed it. She also gave her absolute trust, believing that she wouldn't do anything that was disadvantageous to herself or the Luo family. Perhaps there was also trust in Jin Qinhuang. Other things aside, one point was very obvious. Jin Qinhuang had such a bad reputation, yet grandmother never showed dissatisfaction with this marriage. She didn't show any concern for her future, according to grandmother's care for her. Even if it was hidden in her heart, she wouldn't be unable to see it. So there really was something that she didn't know. Jingwan suddenly hugged old Madame Luo's arm and rubbed against it like a spoiled child. What's the matter? Old Madame Luo looked at her puzzled. Jingwan smiled. Nothing. I just want to get closer to grandmother. Old Madame Luo smiled and patted her hand and didn't ask any more questions. Lunch break, and then they went to Sunny Jia's place. Third brother, Luo Jingbua, went out again. Among the 5 people, he was occasionally busier than Luo Shangshu. Wenhui, this ban has been lifted? The meaning of the higher-ups seems to be that everyone has been restrained for a long time. The aftermath of the flood is basically stable. In addition, it won't be long before we return to the capital, so we can take advantage of this time to have fun. His Majesty said that it seems that it has been deserted for a long time. The imperial concubines in the temporary imperial residence have begun to gorgeously dress up and stroll around the garden again. Who said this? You, a person with 2 bodies who doesn't go out, no. But I don't know? It just happened this morning. Your third brother was dragged out by this year's 3rd scholar, because he didn't send an invitation. Yesterday, the 3 grand scholars in your 5th brother, the number 1 young master in the capital, arrived. This Wenhui is finally starting to look a little bit better, right? Jingwan wasn't belittling anyone. It was just that there were more young masters from aristocratic families who came to the temporary imperial residence. Most of these people were idlers. Even if they were pretending to be cultured, there weren't many who could really do anything. Since there's no invitation, there shouldn't be any restrictions on this impromptu Wenhui. Sister-in-law, why don't we go take a look together? https://11/11807/665324. Chapter 210. It's alright. We're just going to stand on the side and watch the fun. We won't get too close. Your pregnancy is already showing, so anyone with a pair of eyes won't get too close. We'll bring 2 more people with us to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Didn't the doctor say that your pregnancy is very stable and hasn't been affected by your previous pregnancy? So you can be a bit more daring. You don't have to be so careful all the time. It's good to walk around more, Jingwan said. In fact, Sunny Jia hadn't left the residence for nearly 2 months. She was still a bit depressed, so she nodded. Let's go tell grandmother first. Of course. It was a rule to inform one's parents before leaving the residence. Even in the environment of her previous life, Jingwan felt that this rule should be maintained. She should only inform her parents before leaving the residence, so that they wouldn't know where she went. This rule was especially important for the elderly, and it was even more important for special families. Don't say that you don't have. Just saying that you're going out doesn't ruin your. Of course, if there was something shameful, it was another matter. Even if there were a lot of lies, some people would do everything possible to cover it up. Under normal circumstances, Madame Luo naturally wouldn't stop them from leaving the residence. She would let them go after a few words of advice. Madame Luo had always been tolerant towards the younger generation who knew their limits. Back then, Luo Jingying had made her feel disgusted, but that was also because of Luo Jingying's ability. The 3rd and 4th floors of the temporary imperial residence occupied a large area. There were very few halls and pavilions. It was similar in nature to the imperial garden in the imperial palace, But it wasn't as strictly guarded. Basically, it was open for everyone to use every year. In the beginning, when the princesses held banquets, it was also held in this place. However, today there were even more people gathered, regardless of whether they were male or female, or whether they were married or not. Anyone who was interested could go. Of course, even so, looking around, there were basically no people over the age of 30, but there were quite a few children playing around. On the whole, it looked like there were men and women mixed together. But if one looked carefully, it was still men and women gathered together. Even if it was overstepping, it was only between husband and wife or close relatives. Under the watchful eyes of so many people, no one would be foolish enough to do anything inappropriate. When Wang Zhuyuyao saw Jingwan and the others, she called her elder sister and ran over. Jingwan reached out to help her and wiped the sweat on her nose with a handkerchief. "Don't run so fast. Be careful not to fall." Old Lord Yuyao giggled and pulled Jingwan's arm. The two of them were so close that those who didn't know would think that they were real sisters. "Sister, don't worry, I won't fall." She then greeted Sun Yijia, who was beside her, and carefully glanced at her stomach. She had long been taught to stay away from pregnant aunts and sisters. "Sister Jia, is there a baby in your stomach?" "Yes." Sun Yijia smiled. It was probably because she was going to be a mother that she was especially fond of seeing children. "Wangzhu, do you want to touch it?" Seeing her standing beside Jingwan, she was a little timid and curious about her stomach. "Can I?" Her elder sister, who was married, returned home with a pregnant belly, and her sisters-in-law, who were pregnant, all guarded against her like a thief. Especially once, she accidentally bumped into her pregnant elder sister. Before she could do anything, her elder sister wailed like a ghost and howled like a wolf, saying that she was evil at such a young age. This made Wang Zhuyuyao very unhappy and very aggrieved. Fortunately, her mother stood on her side and didn't bother with them anymore. "But, it's just a touch. It's okay." Jingwan rubbed her little head, as if she was about to do something big. Wang Zhuyuyao's little body stiffly took 2 steps forward. She stretched out her hand, but didn't dare to put it down for a long time. Her appearance was indescribably amusing and adorable. Sun Yijia held her hand and pressed it against her stomach. Wang Zhuyuyao's hand retracted a little, but she didn't feel anything strange. She gathered her courage and touched it. Her little face scrunched up. "There's nothing special?" Just as she finished speaking, she suddenly screamed and quickly retracted her hand, returning to Jingwan's side. Sister, it moved." As if she had done something wrong, she grabbed Jingwan's clothes nervously. Everyone couldn't help but be startled, including Sun Yijia. She carefully placed her hand on her stomach and looked at Jingwan with a dreamy expression. It really moved. It's the first time it moved. She had long heard that children would move at a certain time. Although she had always been looking forward to it, it was a little unbelievable that it actually happened unexpectedly. It was also a strange feeling. "Didn't you say that it usually takes 5 months? Isn't it a little too early now?" Sun Yijia was a little worried. "Young madam, you worry too much. It depends on the situation of each person. It's not like there aren't any earlier cases," Granny Gong said. In fact, Granny Gong had never really served a pregnant woman before. However, she was very knowledgeable and could be very methodical. No one could tell that she was actually a novice. She was now very concerned about Sun Yijia's stomach. From time to time, she would check her pulse. She was even more meticulous than the people around Sun Yijia. Granny Gong calmly accepted the gratitude and said that it was her duty as a servant. At the same time, she secretly accumulated practical experience to prepare for Jingwan's future. Jingwan smiled faintly and comforted Wang Zhuyuyao. "Don't be afraid, Yuyao. You heard what Granny Gong said. Moreover, when other people touched it, the baby didn't move. It moved when you touched it. It means that the baby really likes Yuyao." "Really?" Yuyao's eyes revealed a look of pleasant surprise. Children were naturally happy to be liked. "Of course it's true," Sun Yijia also said with a smile. At this time, Yuyao's wet nurse came forward and bowed. She smiled and said, "It seems that Wangzhu and third young madam's child are fated to be together." Nowadays, people believed in these things very much. It was also considered something to be happy about. In fact, many people had already noticed them. Regarding Sun Yijia's pregnancy, it was already known. After all, it was difficult not to know that her mother had made a scene in front of everyone. After that, Sun Yijia never appeared again. They even suspected that Duchess Ding was right. Now, it seemed that it was indeed Duchess Ding's fault. Sun Yijia didn't hide it. Her face was rosy, and the scars on her face were removed. She looked much better than before her face was disfigured. With a gentle smile on her face, compared to the arrogant and indifferent woman, she looked more approachable. If she was wronged by the Luo family, then 99% of the people in the world were probably soaked in Chinese gold thread all day long. This Sun Yijia's life is truly extraordinarily good, someone lamented. Quite a lot. Others echoed and glanced at a place where there were many people. The third young master of the Luo family first painted a stunning painting as a betrothal gift. Then, he played the phoenix to seek for the phoenix. He didn't care about the secular world to express his true feelings. Now it seems that he wasn't pretending at that time. He really cherished Sun Yijia in the palm of his hand. At that time, many people weren't optimistic about this marriage. Indeed, the Luo family was only interested in the power of the Duke Dinggui's mansion. Right now the two families were not on good terms. If they really wanted Sun Yijia's dowry, they could just marry her as a decoration and keep her at home. If the Luo family wanted to control her, would Duke Ding's mansion compete with the powerful minister of the Ministry of Personnel, who was trusted by the emperor? For Sun Yijia, Duke Ding's mansion was almost equivalent to having no backing. However, she was better off than before she got married. She didn't know how many people were slapped in the face. It's obvious that the Luo family's style is impeccable. The third young master of the Luo family is noble and unsullied. He's not a superficial person who only likes beauty. That's true. Otherwise, he wouldn't have such achievements before the age of 20. Didn't they say that Sun Yijia is a complete rouge tiger? A girl next to them whispered. It seemed that she was just purely curious. But that little bit of jealousy and admiration that she thought she hid well, could really be hidden from the eyes of a few people. A woman next to her glanced at her lightly and said carelessly, "These words are used by those who can't eat the grapes, and say that the grapes are sour." The third young master of the Luo family is not a weakling. The Luo family is not powerless. If he really wants to flirt, who can stop him? Not to mention those who want to send him girls. There are countless people who want to recommend themselves to sleep with him. However, I haven't heard that he has touched anyone. In the end, it's because he is unwilling. Her in-laws are good, and her husband is good. She even got pregnant after marrying into the family. She really takes all the good things. It's probably because she has been a good person for several lifetimes. It's time for her to enjoy this blessing in this lifetime. Sun Yijia is pregnant now. Why didn't she find someone to serve the third young master of the Luo family? Even if she's not a rouge tiger, she's too unvirtuous. The third young master of the Luo family dotes on her. She should consider everything for the third young master of the Luo family. The girl from earlier spoke again, and her voice was much higher. Not to mention that many people around her heard it. Even Jingwan and the rest faintly heard it. Because they didn't hear it clearly, they looked in the direction of the voice. Then, Jingwan and the others realized that everyone else had a friendly expression on their faces, except for one girl who had her chin raised. She looked arrogant and provocative. It was simply baffling. Because there was a certain distance between them, they didn't know who she was targeting. Sun Yijia raised her eyebrows slightly. There was really no one who dared to provoke Sister Wan. At least not openly. Not to mention Wang Zhuyao, who was the beloved daughter of Great Elder Princess, was still young. Only an idiot would dare to provoke her. Then it was most likely her. She also glanced at the place where most people were gathered. Although she couldn't see, she knew that her husband should be in the center. I seem to remember that this girl seems to be from Marquis Changping's mansion? Marquis Changping's mansion was one of the 4 dukes and 9 marquises. It was not a country bumpkin, but it was almost in decline. Of course, even if it was in decline, it was not as good as the best. Moreover, it was the 11th prince's maternal family. Is she the legitimate daughter or the daughter of a concubine? Jingwan glanced at her with a smile. What does it have to do with us? Well, Sister Wan, you're right. Sunny Jia nodded in agreement. Then, she ignored them and prepared to find a place to sit. But in this world, there was a kind of person who would not be obedient if you ignored them. Look, this girl came up to you. People who blocked his way for no reason would make him feel very unhappy. However, the girl didn't want to offend Jingwan. She greeted her with a smile, and then tried to talk to Jingwan. Unfortunately, Jingwan looked indifferent and ignored her. She didn't give her a hard time out of the most basic courtesy. The problem was, there were some people who didn't know how to read people's faces when you gave them face. Or, even if they understood, they would pretend that they didn't know. Even if they hit the snake with the stick, they would take advantage of it and act as if they were familiar with you. On one hand, they would intimately try to befriend you, but on the other hand, they would secretly look at your sister-in-law with disdain in their eyes. On the other hand, they would praise you from head to toe, and on the other hand, express their reverence for your elder brother. Jingwan finally looked her in the eye. Miss, has anyone ever told you that you are very noisy? Her words made the girl's face turn pale. Her eyes flashed with anger, but she bit her lip and looked like she was bullied. Third Miss, I'm sorry. What you are has nothing to do with me. I'm not familiar with you. Also, the next time you talk to someone you don't know, please introduce yourself first, or at least tell me your surname. After all, after I came to the capital, I didn't go out much, so I didn't meet many people. Even those famous and well-known people might not be able to match up with me the first time I meet them, right? Jingwan smiled warmly, but her words were not polite at all. The girl looked at Jingwan in disbelief. How can you be this kind of person? Was written all over her face. There were quite a number of people who were leisurely watching the show, and at this moment, they couldn't help but burst out in laughter. No matter how thick her skin was, she couldn't help but blush. I originally thought that for a person like Third Young Master Luo, his biological sister would be a gentle and kind person with good upbringing. I didn't expect. Then I'm really sorry to disappoint you. That young lady finally raised her chin with an arrogant look. You're really a disgrace to Third Young Master Luo. You're just a young lady, yet you keep talking about a married man. Aren't you ashamed? This young lady's upbringing is for people with upbringing. Towards someone who is rushing to come between other people's husband and wife to be a concubine, who is willing to lower herself to others. What right do you have to ask this young lady to be amiable? My Luo family's residence is harmonious. Towards someone who wants to enter my house to stir up trouble, I'm already being very polite by not giving you a slap. Even if my third brother wants to take in a concubine, he would also choose a gentle, chaste and well-behaved young lady. The moment you came up, you're squeezing my sister-in-law. One look, and I can tell that you're a troublemaker. No matter how much money you pay, no one will be willing to accept you. It must be said that it was probably because of Li Hongyuan that Jingwan's temper had been rising recently. Thinking about it, for someone who could even lay her hands on, kick and throw her face at the king of hell, compared to her, other people were really not enough to look at. This ruthlessly slapped her face, peeled off her face, and threw her on the ground, and even stepped on her twice. Furthermore, her reputation was damaged. Not to mention other things. If Jingwan's words were spread out, this young lady's marriage would be in jeopardy. So Jingwan's words were not only impolite, but also a little vicious. Many people were muttering in their hearts. This third young lady Luo looked like a good-tempered person. If they really offended her, she would peel off a layer of skin. Moreover, she was now a person of noble status, and it would be difficult to find a way to make up for it. It was best not to offend her. You. That young lady pointed at Jingwan, so angry that her whole body was trembling. Jingwan looked at her calmly. It was not a provocation, but it was more like a provocation. That young lady was so angry that she lost her mind and slapped her. Jingwan was just about to push away when Hei Mei's eyes were sharp, and her hands were quick. In a flash, she was in front of Jingwan. She grabbed her wrist and unceremoniously threw her out. With her physique, The other party fell to the ground in an instant. At this time, a young woman hurriedly stood up and wanted to help her up. But that young lady did not appreciate it. Not only did she shake off the young woman's hand, she also slapped her. Seeing me being bullied, you're very happy, right? When we go back, I'll ask my mother to skin you. When she looked at Jingwan again, her eyes were full of hatred. She lay on the ground and did not get up, shouting that she did not want to live after being humiliated like this. The young woman was the most embarrassed. With the red palm print on her face, she felt very wronged. She wanted to apologize to Jingwan, but she was worried that her sister-in-law would not forgive her. She wanted to appease her sister-in-law, but she also knew that it would not work. She was in a dilemma. Seeing that the matter was getting bigger and bigger, more and more people were paying attention to it. Jingwan looked on coldly. To be honest, this person was shameless, but it really did not affect her. Sun Yijia pulled Jingwan, and there was a trace of worry in her eyes. In the end, Sister Wan was still protecting her. In fact, things did not have to go to this step at all. Sun Yijia herself did not care. She had already experienced the gossip, so it did not hurt or itch. But she did not want Sister Wan's reputation to be damaged because of her. Jingwan patted her hand comfortingly, indicating that this was just a small matter, and that there was no need to worry about it. He signaled for the servants to protect her and isolate all irrelevant people from the outside. All potential dangers must be eliminated. However, it was not easy to go out and encounter this kind of thing. It was also bad luck. Luo Jingbo was concentrating on painting. In the lotus pond in summer, a group of koi fish frolicked around. This time, they were vivid on the paper. Their postures were different and vivid, as if the fish were really swimming on the paper. At the beginning, Luo Jingbo's skillful and free posture was clearly just a few strokes, but he outlined their thousands of postures. In order to not disturb his painting, the people who were closer to him were all whispering. In fact, even if they were a little louder, it was not a big problem. Luo Jingbo was basically in a state of selflessness. It was just that the discussion outside was getting louder and louder, to the extent that the people close to Luo Jingbo frowned in displeasure. What's going on? Xie Renshuan and Xie Zhuangyuan asked, deliberately lowering their voices. It seems that the girls are quarreling, but it seems to involve the Luo family's third young lady. The person behind said, and couldn't help but glance at Luo Jingbo. Even people who were more selfless when doing things were still very sensitive to certain things, such as people or things that were closely related to them. The words Luo family's third young lady directly entered Luo Jingbo's ears. His hand paused and he turned around. Who? My little sister? What happened? Chen Jingmin and Sun Yilin were also concerned. When it came to Jingwan, probably other things would not attract their attention. Being watched by these people, the person who just spoke felt a little pressured. Luo Jingbo simply put down his brush and directly stood up. The people surrounding him hurriedly made way. Chen Jingmin and Sun Yilin did not say anything and followed. The main character had already left. The others looked at each other and also followed to join in the fun. Luo Jingbo saw from afar that not only was his little sister, but also his wife. His heart thumped and he quickened his pace, appearing a little anxious. Seeing the root of the disaster appear, the onlookers took the initiative to make way. The other men looked at Luo Jingbo with a little jealousy and a little schadenfreude. The former was because his luck with women was good. The latter was because his luck with women was too good. Although the girl on the ground was not to the extent of making a scene and rolling on the ground, she did not want to get up. Similarly, she would not look good either. When she saw Luo Jingbo appear, she immediately looked even more pitiful. However, this was a heartless situation. There were a lot of people on the ground, but he did not see them at all. In his eyes, there were only his little sister and his wife. He nervously confirmed that the two of them were fine. Then he breathed a sigh of relief, and then asked what happened. From the beginning to the end, he unconsciously protected Sun Yijia. Luo Jingbo may be a blockhead in some aspects, but when he did things, he could inadvertently show off. Just like now, who knew how many women faintly stared at Sun Yijia, whether they were looking at him for personal reasons or sincerely. When they really saw him, the feeling was actually completely different. It seemed that envy, jealousy, and hatred were not enough to express their inner thoughts. Why didn't they meet such a man? Sun Yijia's heart was indescribably sweet. Although she was a little embarrassed to be so close to Luo Jinghua in front of so many people, she did not intend to push him away. She only whispered to Luo Jinghua what happened. Luo Jinghua frowned and looked at the girl who was looking at him with tears in her eyes. He had never seen her before. Jingwan looked at her brother and suddenly smiled. Third brother, so many women like you and want to be your concubine. Are you happy? When Luo Jinghua heard this, he quivered and looked at his little sister. In other people's eyes, her smile was probably like a flower, but in his eyes, his little sister's smile was terrifying. He could not help but shrink behind Sun Yijia and said sternly, "What's there to be happy about? Little sister, you don't know, but I don't dare to go to many places. It's very annoying." Third brother, you are a rare talent. He also had a good temper. More importantly, he was an infatuated seed. His attitude towards his sister-in-law proved this point. So many people came to him because of this last point. However, if they really succeeded, would he still be that infatuated and faithful man? They would not think so much. They only wanted to get that feeling for themselves. Rare talent. Who did this to him? He really wanted to expose his little sister, but he did not dare to. Miss, it's very embarrassing for you to be like this. You should get up first. Also, thank you for your love. It's just that I don't have the fortune to enjoy it. Miss should have a good marriage of her own. If she had been pretending before, she really felt like she was about to collapse. Young master, if you say so. I don't have the face to continue living. If you don't want to live, then die early. The man's cold and stern voice seemed to freeze her for 3 days. Digression: what was written in the previous chapter that made people misunderstand? Why did people think that Wan had been completely eaten up? https://11/11807/6653259. Chapter 211. Because of this voice, this man, Jingwan discovered that many people involuntarily trembled, as if they had been greatly frightened. They hurriedly retreated a few steps, especially those who happened to be blocking the path. Like birds startled by the twang of a bow, it could be seen that the prestige of the living king of hell was not just for show. Jingwan tilted her head and looked at Li Hongyuan, who had changed back into his black casual clothes after the hottest period had passed. He had a cold gaze, a dragon's beard, and a tiger's steps. He had an extraordinary aura. She had to admit that this man was really very dazzling. It was just that, every time he appeared, he seemed to want to make his presence known. He lived overbearingly and ostentatiously. In his dictionary, there seemed to be no such words as restrained, careful. It was just that, after such a man looked at her, his gaze would always become gentle. Moreover, it seemed that each time, he was more blatant and undisguised. After Jingwan met his eyes, she didn't know why she thought of what happened last night. She subconsciously averted her gaze, her face slightly hot. This bastard had too many tricks in bed. Every time, she was made to float in the clouds by him. Her mind was blank. How could she still care about shame or not? When she was truly ashamed, it was only when she thought about it later. However, Jingwan's shamelessness had been honed through years of training. Jingwan averted her gaze, so she didn't see Li Hongyuan's fleeting smile. First, it was because of the fear of Jin Qinhuang. Second, it was because of the reverence of the imperial family. At this time, almost no one would look directly at Li Hongyuan. However, it was only almost. There would always be a few who wouldn't be afraid of him, and would be calm and collected. There were also those who placed their gazes on Jingwan, and naturally followed her gaze. Because Wan Fengfei's heart was attached to Li Hongyuan, she could easily feel that he treated Jingwan differently. And as love rivals, Sun Yilin and Chen Jingmin could naturally read the feelings in his eyes, and didn't know what kind of mood they were in. However, that was Jingwan's upright fiancé. Both of them were outdated, and didn't have any position to say anything. On the contrary, Jin Qinhuang's reputation was originally terrible to the extreme. To be able to obtain his love, for Jingwan, there were only benefits and no disadvantages. From this point of view, Jin Qinhuang couldn't wait for Jin Qinhuang to hold him in the palm of his hand wholeheartedly. But that surging jealousy, as well as that uncontrollable jealousy, made their hearts, livers, and lungs burn with pain. Li Hongyuan's cold gaze swept over, and the two people subconsciously lowered their heads. Li Hongyuan hooked up a mocking smile. Without mentioning anything else, just based on his identity, he could easily crush them to death. In front of Ben Wang, those pair of eyes weren't honest. They really didn't want their lives to be too long. However, he was stopped last night, and didn't directly dispose of the two people. Naturally, it wasn't good to really kill them. Keeping these two people alive occasionally had some use, such as seizing the opportunity to cause trouble or something. But he couldn't just ignore them like this. Completely ignoring the fact that he was the one who designed the other person's marriage, and then turned around to kick the other person away. To a certain extent, he was the one who snatched the other person's fiancée. Now he instead viewed her as a thorn in his side. How shameless was he? Li Hongyuan stood beside Jingwan, and the surrounding people hurriedly paid their respects. And that young lady of Marquis Chongping Fu who was lying on the ground, trembling as she knelt on the ground. Li Hongyuan reached out to support Jingwan. As for the others, they didn't even bother to give half a glance. Fixedly looking at Jingwan for a moment, they then coldly opened their mouth. Dispense with the formalities. That kneeling young lady also trembled as she prepared to stand up. Ben Wang allowed you to stand up? The young lady, who had just stood up, half knelt down again with a plop. The sound of her knees hitting the ground was so clear that it made her suck in a breath of cold air. But she didn't dare to make the slightest sound. Teardrops swirled in her eyes, but she held them back and didn't dare to let them fall. She even lowered her head, not daring to let him see her weak posture. Jin Qinhuang kept a courtyard full of beauties, and would also place beauties in the palm of his hand to pamper them. But there was a prerequisite. That must be the beauties that caught his eye. As for those that didn't catch his eye, they should never expect him to have tender feelings for the fairer sex. When he wanted to attack someone, there would be no distinction between men and women. Just now, you were the one who was shouting that you don't have the face to live? The lotus pond at the side, jump in by yourself. That young lady was scared to death. What she said just now was only pretending to be weak, a habitual method to make people's hearts soften. She was still so young, and it wasn't something that she had to die. How could she really commit suicide? But this living king of hell always kept his word. If he wanted to pinch a person to death, it really was as simple as pinching an ant. It was a matter of life and death. How could she continue to do nothing? Wang Ye, please spare my life. This subject's daughter only spoke unintentionally, asking Wang Ye to be magnanimous and spare this subject's daughter this time. Wang Ye has mercy. Wang Ye has mercy. While kowtowing, she begged for mercy. Someone come. Throw her into the water for Ben Wang. Li Hongyuan didn't show the slightest bit of emotion, as he coldly and ruthlessly said. The ability of the people around Li Hongyuan to carry out his orders was absolutely first class. A guard stepped forward and grabbed that young lady's arm, dragging her towards the lotus pond. His speed was very fast, as if the weight of a person didn't affect him at all. That young lady flailed her arms and legs, but she didn't have the slightest bit of image. She cried until her face collapsed, and at the same time, she kept begging for mercy. There were a lot of rumors about Jin Wangya, but it was the first time that the majority of the people present had seen him kill someone without saying a word. As the saying goes, rumors would never be as shocking as seeing it with your own eyes. Towards Jin Wangya's reputation as the living king of hell, they had a deeper understanding. It was clear that the weather had just cooled down a bit, and they were still wearing summer clothes, but they felt a cold air rush up from the soles of their feet, making them feel that their bones and blood were cold. Jingwan was also greatly shocked by Li Hongyuan's style. Seeing that the former guard was about to jump into the water with the young lady of Marquis Chongping Fu, but when the master said to press her into the water, it was naturally impossible to just throw her in. Wait, 2 words, but it also made that guard obediently stop. When the master's orders were in conflict with the future female masters, he would temporarily listen to the future female master's orders. Then, when the 2 masters reached a consensus, he would carry out the final order. This was probably the consensus that Li Hongyuan's servants had reached in their hearts. In reality, it was impossible for the master to bring the matters that had to be dealt with in front of the Luo 3rd Mississippi. Since it was done in front of her, either the master wanted to play dirty, or he did not care about the final result. It didn't matter whether it was true or not. To a large extent, the final decision would be made by the Luo 3rd Mississippi. Li Hongyuan quietly looked at her, as if waiting for her to speak. Jingwan still hadn't touched the other's bottom line of indulgence, but now, she didn't think that she could influence all of his decisions. She hesitated for a moment, asking Wang Yi to be lenient. It's just some inappropriate words and actions. It's not a crime worthy of death. You plead for leniency, Ben Wang will naturally give you face. However, in the future, if you meet this kind of person, there's no need to waste your breath. You can directly ask someone to deal with them. Remember, in the future, you will be Ben Wang's Wang Fei, husband and wife as one. Whatever honor Ben Wang has, you will have the same honor. Whatever you encounter, just be at ease and do it boldly. If something happens, Ben Wang will take responsibility. Hiss. This was simply a living king of hell, who wanted to bring out a female king of hell. When they were in the Gong Wang Fu, they had already noticed that Jin Wang Yi treated Jingwan differently. Now that they had truly said it out, they feared that no one would go up and find fault with her. Jingwan's heart was originally not made of stone. In addition, it wasn't the first time that she had been touched by Li Hongyuan. When he said such words and gave her such dignity, her heart felt warm. She unconsciously revealed a smile and squatted. Many thanks to Wang Yi. That if she was willing, she could completely walk sideways in the capital in the future. No matter who it was, they would have to be respectful to her. When they spoke, they would also have to be careful to avoid inadvertently saying something that would offend people. Even if she didn't wear the phoenix robe, she would still become the most honorable woman in the world. These words weren't said for fun. That girl escaped from death. At this moment, she was so grateful to Jingwan that she shed tears. Don't talk about having any strange thoughts. She only wished that she could disappear forever. However, she was so frightened that her hands and feet went soft and limp on the ground. She couldn't even think of thanking Jingwan. The death penalty can be avoided, but it's difficult to escape punishment. With one sentence, the person who had climbed up from the pit was slapped back down. Which family are you from? Obviously, if she didn't kill you, she would directly implicate you. Which family are you from? Roll out and claim yourself. As soon as her voice fell, the young woman who had been beaten just now and a man rolled and crawled out to kneel. Digression https://11/118007/6653262. Chapter 212. Just as he finished speaking, the young woman and the man who had been beaten earlier scrambled out and knelt down. If it was now, even though they knew it was a disaster, if they could avoid it, they probably wouldn't want to come out. However, they were unlucky enough to be implicated. Could they deny that they were from Marquis Chongping's household? If they didn't come out, even if they hesitated for a moment, they would probably be betrayed by the gazes of others. This subject's Chuisher from Marquis Chongping's household greets Your Highness. May Your Highness live for 1,000 years. After speaking, they knelt on the ground, not daring to raise their heads or speak. Their trembling bodies betrayed their true emotions. Marquis Chongping's household, Li Hongyuan murmured. Marquis Chongping's household is in decline, but the Chui clan still has some foundation. Even if they don't have any foundation, they should at least put on a show. They don't even care about their face anymore producing such a thing? Just based on that girl's attitude, she didn't have the slightest bit of modesty that a noble family should have. Even if they were in decline and couldn't support themselves financially, they shouldn't have lost their strength of character. The Chuisher's face could be said to have been completely thrown away. Li Hongyuan had never been polite with his words. He didn't know how to be tactful. He was used to slapping people's faces and poking at people's pain. However, with his status, even if he tore open their scars and poked them until they were drenched in blood, they could only endure it without daring to make a sound. Normal people, fine. Normal people wouldn't be able to raise him to such a level. The faces of the two kneeling people flushed red. But what could they do? That was all their own doing. Your Highness, this servant knows a thing or two about Marquis Chongping's household. At this moment, Mama Gong suddenly spoke. If it was a normal servant, Li Hongyuan naturally wouldn't pay attention. However, normal servants wouldn't dare to speak at this time. Li Hongyuan glanced at Jingwan. Seeing that she seemed a little curious, he decided to forget it. Since his wife was curious, there was no harm in listening. He could also naturally take a look at her. Speak. Before Mama Gong had left the capital, in order to pave the way for Jingwan, she had naturally done her research on the various families in the capital. As for Marquis Chongping's estate, it was probably a coincidence that she had a very detailed understanding of it. Marquis Chongping's current marchioness is actually the second wife. It is said that she is bedridden all year round. Her concubine mother is in charge of the household, and the marchioness will only appear when necessary. Back then, Marquis Chongping's first wife died in childbirth, and he remarried his current wife. After being married to Marquis Chongping for more than 10 years, she was said to be a hen that couldn't lay eggs. Marquis Chongping took pity on her weak body and couldn't bear to see her suffer the pain of bearing children, so she received quite a lot of praise. At this point, Nanny Gong revealed a mocking smile. But in reality, this Marquis Chongping's wife is just a decoration. She usually doesn't appear, not because her body is weak, but because she is imprisoned in a small courtyard in the Marquis's estate. Everyone was in an uproar. Outsiders had mixed opinions about the Marquis of Chongping. Some said that he was easily swayed and had a weak personality, while others said that he valued relationships and had a tender heart for the fairer sex. So it wasn't like that at all. However, looking at the deathly pale faces of the people in Marquis Chongping's fu, this might be true. Li Hongyuan twiddled his fingers. He never cared about irrelevant people. Continue, he spoke casually. Marquis Chongping has a beloved woman. This person has nothing but a face. Wasn't this saying used to describe our Jin Qin Wang? He really dared to say it. Everyone carefully peeked at Li Hongyuan, but seeing that his expression was normal, they couldn't help but silently criticize him. Marquis Chongping was so infatuated with her that his first wife died in childbirth. Because that woman also gave birth on the same day, all of the midwives and doctors were taken over by that side. However, I don't know if her life is strong or not, but her mother died while she lived well. It seems that it is this young lady. Nanny Gong's gaze fell on Miss Cui, who was in an unusual sorry state. Her emotions couldn't be seen. That woman's life doesn't seem so good. So many people suffered, but the child she gave birth to died prematurely. Everyone pondered over these words. The more they thought about it, the more they felt that it wasn't right. Especially the man who was still kneeling. His expression was abnormally ugly and filled with deep hatred. He didn't know that his own mother had died like this. How could his father be so ruthless? That was his first wife. Marquis Chongping's beloved concubine lost her child and had a transference effect towards the first wife's child. She begged Marquis Chongping to let her raise the child for the time being. Marquis Chongping pitied his beloved concubine and pitied the fact that the child was born without a mother. So he nodded and agreed. This first wife's child was raised by a lowly concubine. They had always had a deep mother-daughter relationship. Even when that woman gave birth to another child, this didn't change. This young lady had always called her mother. A child raised by a woman without any merit, not knowing the rules, not following propriety, not knowing shame and not following etiquette, can be understood. Many people's gazes fell on Nanny Gong. Her ability to trample on people was quite impressive. Originally, without the first wife as a stumbling block, everything was perfect. However, as a marquis, how could he not have a wife to hold the fort in the marquis's household? A lowly servant of unknown origin naturally couldn't be made the marquis's wife. However, if he were to remarry, what if she made things difficult for his beloved concubine? Thus, he carefully selected someone who was willing to be a puppet. The second wife of the Marquis of Chongping was only willing because Marquis Chongping wanted to repay her kindness. This young lady took a thief as her mother, humiliated her own brother, slapped her own sister-in-law in public, and even acted like an elder sister to that thief's child. Nanny Gong's gaze fell on the kneeling man again. As the Marquis's eldest son, any servant can trample on him. When he reached the age of marriage, I married a merchant's daughter for money. I even glorified it by saying that she was my benefactor in the past. As a person, I can't be heartless. Thus, I didn't despise her status, and even let the eldest son marry her to show my benevolence. Under normal circumstances, a merchant's daughter wouldn't be qualified to be the Marquis's eldest son's concubine. The two kneeling people, the Marquis Chongping's eldest son and eldest daughter-in-law, had been afraid before, but now they were unwilling and in pain. There was also the shame and embarrassment of having their wounds torn open. As for this merchant's daughter, she was only an unfavored concubine's daughter. She looked like she had a large dowry, but not a single copper coin went into her hands. After all, that was only a transaction between the Marquis's household and the merchant's family. They gave up money to buy the path they wanted. How could they give up a beloved daughter to a man with no future to speak of? Fortunately, this merchant's daughter, other than her soft nature, and only knowing how to swallow her anger, is still passable in other aspects. The husband and wife pair supported each other, and could be considered harmonious. TSK, this was countless times more exciting than the play on the stage. Marquis Chongping's second son, born from his beloved concubine, was recorded under the Marquis's wife's name at birth. He was raised in the name of the first wife. It is said that he is distinguished and elegant, with brilliant literary talent. Logically speaking, with today's situation, he shouldn't be absent. Everyone looked around. Over here. Someone shouted, following which, a path opened up in that direction. It's not my fault, it's not my fault. Probably because he was in the middle of puberty, his voice sounded like that of a duck, and there was even a hint of sobbing. Someone seemed to want to push him out, but seeing no one appear after a long time, one could roughly guess what state he was in. This time, without Li Hongyuan needing to instruct someone, a guard from the front of the mountain dragged the person over. He looked to be only 13 or 14 years old, but at this moment he was hugging his head tightly, wailing loudly, "It's not my fault. I'm not from the Marquis's household, I'm not." Everyone looked at each other. In order to not be implicated, he even denied his own identity. His family's ancestor? Wasn't this too much of a coward? Those who originally knew him, and even had a good relationship with him, were all ashamed to see him at this time. This youth was thrown a few steps away from Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan looked down from above. That gaze was like looking at an inanimate object. Being so secretive, is it you who can't be seen? Or is it Ben Wang? When they wanted to nitpick, they would definitely say that everything they did was wrong. The youth was kicked, clearly wanting him to remove his hand, but he still hugged his head tightly, covered his face, and shivered. Moreover, there was a puddle of water on the ground. Someone exclaimed, and then hurriedly retreated. Probably no one would know that the reason why this person was so afraid of Li Hongyuan was because last year, he was audacious and self-righteous. Or it could be said that a newborn calf was not afraid of a tiger. He thought that even if Jin Qinhuang was a Wangya, he could not be lawless. He courted death and came to provoke him. The result was naturally ruthless, and he was clearly told that if he dared to appear again, he would be completely crippled. The people around Li Hongyuan had many tricks up their sleeves. This second young master Chui's psychological shadow had not disappeared until now. Seeing Jin Qinhuang, this shadow was instantly magnified 10 times, 100 times. He was terrified to the extreme, pissing his pants in terror, and not daring to let Li Hongyuan see his face. In fact, he was purely thinking too much. In the sea of people that Li Hongyuan had taught a lesson, he did not have the effort to remember who a small fish or shrimp was, or what kind of face he had. Even if the people around him remembered him well, they would not remind Li Hongyuan when they had nothing to do, because that was not asking for credit but seeking death. Li Hongyuan's face was dark. He reached out to grab Jingwan's hand and walked away. Clean it up. Everyone here was a noble person. If they were tainted, they naturally could not stay. Jingwan was pulled away by Li Hongyuan. In this public place, even husband and wife scrupulously observed etiquette and would not be so intimate. Jingwan tried to pull her hand back, but the result could be imagined. Jingwan also could not make too big of a movement, otherwise it would only attract more attention. After entering a pavilion not far away, he sat down and motioned for Jingwan to sit next to him. Jingwan looked at him. Many thanks to Wang, but it is inappropriate for this subject to stand. Li Hongyuan didn't say anything. He just stared straight at her. This matter was not over yet. The related people could not leave, and the unrelated people did not want to leave. Being in the center of everyone's attention, Jingwan's scalp was a little numb. She was a little resentful towards Li Hongyuan, but more than that, she was helpless. Competing with this person, she would probably always be the loser. If the stalemate continued, the situation would only be more awkward. Many thanks to Wang. Jingwan could only thank him, and then, as far as possible, she distanced herself from him. Ben Wang said, "You and Ben Wang have the same honor," Li Hongyuan said after she sat down. Jingwan smiled. Sitting down, she was a lot calmer. This scene naturally stung some people's eyes. Even when he was her fiancé, he could not be so close to her. They had to take into account her reputation. They could not be close to Jingwan and not let her be criticized, but Jin Qinwang could. For example, just now when they held hands, just like now. How many people saw it? But they all looked down and pretended not to see it. Jingwan was calm, and then she asked Sunny Jia to sit down next to her. Sunny Jia glanced at Li Hongyuan. Seeing that he did not express anything, for the sake of the child in her belly, she could not stand for long. She took it as his acquiescence, and also sat down without any politeness. Her impression of Li Hongyuan was a little better than before, but only because he was good to Jingwan. Towards him, she still did not have a good impression. Li Hongyuan looked at Gong Mama. "Is it over?" Replying to Wang Yi, Marquis Changping's only legitimate son is his eldest son. To the outside world, the first child of his beloved concubine, who died at birth, was born of his first wife. Originally, he was living well, but was strangled to death by that woman. Then, she let her daughter pretend to be the first wife's leftover child. Nonsense. I am the eldest daughter of the first wife of the Marquis of Changping's estate, not some concubine's daughter. Don't slander me. Miss Cui hadn't dared to speak up before. No matter how much Mama Gong had told her about her parents, she had remained silent. But now that her identity was involved, she couldn't care less about being afraid, and hurriedly jumped out to deny it. However, looking at her flustered expression and her stern expression, everyone understood that what she said was most likely true. Moreover, this young lady definitely knew about her background. It was natural to be close to that thief mother, without any barrier. Child Cui, on the other hand, ignored his fear of Li Hongyuan, and looked at Mammy Gong in disbelief. Is what this Mammy said true? Then, he repeatedly tolerated the so-called legitimate younger sister, thinking that she was still young, and was instigated by that bitch. But in the end, his eyes were bloodshot with hatred, and he was so angry that he wanted to kill someone. You already have the answer in your heart. Why bother to ask? When his mother passed away, although he was only 5 or 6 years old, he already remembered that his mother was a gentle and quiet woman. However, his younger sister was unruly, willful, unintelligent, and opinionated. Everyone in his maternal family said that she was not like his mother at all. Because she looked more like her father, no one doubted her identity. Young Master Cui suddenly flew into a rage, punching and kicking the girl who was still clamoring beside him. He was like an enraged beast, and his gaze was as if he wanted to eat her alive. It was not right for a man to beat a girl so violently. However, if all of this was true, then this Master Cui was too pitiful. His own father had killed his own mother, his own brother had been strangled to death, and his identity had been replaced by a concubine's daughter. His honor and glory had all been taken away by a fake son. Marquis Changping had always said that his eldest son was unworthy, and that his second son was clever, and he had the intention of giving the title to his second son. In the past, he really believed that his father did not like him, because he had a hard fate. Even if it did not make sense, He would find excuses to deceive himself and others. But when everything was laid bare, everyone could feel the towering hatred. Because of this, no one dared to step forward. At first, Miss Chui still cursed and wanted to retaliate, wanting her father to punish him severely. But gradually, her body hurt more and more, and she felt like she was going to be beaten to death. "Big brother, don't hit me, please don't hit me. Don't listen to the nonsense of outsiders. I am your younger sister. Didn't you say that you love me the most?" Her last words were like the ignition of a barrel of explosives. She was sometimes cold and sometimes warm to him. Now that he thought about it, it seemed that she would only get close to him when she needed him to be the scapegoat. The rest of the time, she would act high and mighty. He thought that he had to please that woman, so he had to do this. But the truth was that he was too stupid. He had mixed up the act with his true feelings. "You bitch, you deserve to die, deserve to die." This ruthless kick caused him to spit out blood. Jingwan frowned slightly. She glanced sideways at Sun Yijia in her stomach. This kind of violence and blood was not good. Li Hongyuan saw Jingwan's reaction. Enough. With these two simple words, someone immediately stepped forward to stop them. Master Chui continued like a madman. But he was after all a frail young master. How could he compare to the powerful guards? He was easily subdued. Marquis Changping. Ben Wang does not need to fabricate charges for him. Not fixing the curtains, favoring the concubine, and neglecting the wife, using a concubine as the legitimate wife. These are enough for Marquis Changping to be replaced with someone else. This could be said to be the final word. Even if these were just Mama Gong's side of the story, so what? Since Jin Qinhuang said it was true, then it must be true. If Marquis Changping was a marquis with illustrious power, he would naturally not let it go. Even if he was convicted, he would need to investigate. Even Li Hongyuan would not easily say such a thing. However, he only had the title of marquis and a 6th-rank official position. Unfortunately, they were all empty titles. As for the other clansmen of the Chui family, in reality, they vaguely knew that their future would be broader if they were further away from Marquis Changping Fu. As for that second Master Chui, who was so frightened that he wet his pants, they did not know if he was really dealt with. In any case, he did not appear again. The rest of the matter had nothing to do with them. Whether it was a demotion, or a replacement, it was all up to the emperor. Li Hongyuan waved his hand, letting them disperse and do what they should do. Even Sun Yijia's eyes were clearly trying to chase him away. Sun Yijia could not help but twitch her mouth. "Jingbua, what were you drawing just now? Can I take a look?" "I'm not done yet. Why don't you come with me? You can't stand for too long. I'll have someone add a seat for you." Even if Luo Jingbo was a blockhead, he was not completely blind. What's more, he had already experienced the atmosphere between his younger sister and his future brother-in-law that did not allow others to disturb them. If he forced himself to stay on the side, it would only cause him heart-piercing pain. "Okay, I haven't seen you draw outside." He wanted to chase her away. She did not want to stay here. Outside the pavilion, Chen Jingmin and Sun Yilin had not yet left. These two brothers were in the same boat. Sun Yijia tugged at her elder brother, while Luo Jingbo directly hooked his arm around Chen Jingmin's neck and dragged him away. He did not want to arouse suspicion and cause unnecessary gossip, so he went along with the husband and wife. However, his footsteps were a little heavy, and it was difficult for him to raise a smile on his face. When it came to matters of the heart, it was useless to persuade them too much. They had to walk out on their own. Then, the servants also retreated far away. After all, they were outside, so Li Hongyuan did not go so far as to touch her. He only tilted his head and looked at her, as if she would be satisfied as long as she looked at him like this. There was nothing to distract them. If they were stared at for too long, it would be easy to get embarrassed. It was better to hug intimately in private. Jingwan wanted to rudely slap him away, but if she did, she would probably be in trouble. He indulged her in private, and she could casually scratch and bite him in bed. However, she could not do it in public. If she offended him in the slightest, not to mention other things, she probably would not be able to pass the trial of noble consort Su. Li Hongyuan had always been good at reaching for a yard after taking an inch, and he was even better at taking advantage of people's weaknesses. Because he knew that she had scruples, he became more and more unscrupulous. He knew that it was not good to touch her, so he let her get up and sit on the other side of the table. Li Hongyuan turned around, supported his chin with one hand, and continued to look at her calmly, probably because his back was completely facing the person he did not want to do. His eyes became more and more unscrupulous. They were gentle and affectionate, but there was also a naked desire. That gaze was as if he wanted to strip her naked. "Prince, can you not look at this subject's daughter like this?" Jingwan curled her lips, but only Li Hongyuan knew that she was gnashing her teeth. Actually, this husband would like to see how beautiful Wan Wan would be in such a place without an inch of clothing. Jingwan's face flushed red. She was embarrassed and angry. "Pervert," she said hatefully. Li Hongyuan curled his lips into a charming smile. "Wan Wan, only today did you know that your husband is a pervert? I thought that you should have known on the 17th of May. However, Wan Wan can't blame this husband. You can only blame Wan Wan for being too delicious. Moreover, this husband has not eaten enough until now. Alas, Wan Wan, why don't you feel sorry for your husband?" Jingwan's face was like a color palette. She thought that she had a glib tongue, but when it came to such a perverted topic, she could only fail miserably. "Shut up. Also, you are not a husband yet. A fiancé is also a husband." "Oh, is that so?" Jingwan put on a fake smile. "In that case, you are only the third husband." Jingwan spoke quickly and regretted it as soon as she finished speaking. She saw a certain someone's face become gloomy in an instant. The temperature seemed to have dropped several degrees, and she even felt that ice was about to fall. His face changed faster than flipping through a book. She did not forget why he went crazy last night. In the end, she was the one who suffered. This person would really kill someone without a word. It was definitely not a joke. It was really tiring to meet such a person who treated human life as grass. "Ayuan." Jingwan softened her tone. Li Hongyuan smiled again, but it was a gloomy smile. "Ayuan, Ayuan, I am still your 8th wife. We are even, right?" "Even? The ones before you don't care about me, but the ones before me don't give up on you. How can we be even? Last night, you said that you might not be able to see them, and today, hey, you can't be like this. How can today's situation be confused? Is it possible that in the future, where they are, I have to stay far away from them? Why? She did not do anything shameful. Indeed, you should not avoid them. They are not qualified, so you are not allowed to casually kill people." Jingwan said immediately. "Wan Wan, who are you to say this? Even if Imperial Father says not allowed to me, it may not be useful." Jingwan pursed her lips and did not speak. Li Hongyuan's cold air was restrained a little. Sure enough, it was still too early for her to be unscrupulous towards him. Some words couldn't be said too much. If he wasn't careful, she would probably shrink back and become self-disciplined. "Don't worry, I will not easily take their lives." In other words, he probably would not let them go easily. Was it because of possessiveness or jealousy? Or maybe it was both. "Don't go too far. I only had one engagement with them, that's all." She really could not let go of this man and quarrel with him. Jingwan showed weakness. Li Hongyuan knew when to stop. It was not worth quarreling with outsiders. "I estimate that we will return to the capital in 10 days at most. After that, it will be the Mid-Autumn Festival. Wan Wan, you will have your adulthood ceremony before the Spring Festival. After the Spring Festival, we will get married." She didn't know if it was because his expression was too gentle, or if there was too much expectation in his eyes, but Jingwan subconsciously nodded. Okay. After she agreed, she was stunned for a moment, but then she smiled in relief. There was no rule that said that she had to wait until the 15th to have her adulthood ceremony. Her birthday was in February, and it would be the 15th of February next year. It was not a virtual year. There was no problem for her to have her adulthood ceremony a few months before and after. Although the wedding date was not set, it should be in the spring of next year. The summer was too hot, and this man probably would not let her delay it until autumn. Seeing Jingwan agree, Li Hongyuan's negative emotions all disappeared, and he showed an incredibly gentle smile. https://11/11807/6653267. Mobile edition. Chapter 213. Such a group of people naturally attracted everyone's attention. With one look, it was clear who they were here for. When Li Hongyuan went out on a daily basis, he usually brought along his personal attendants and bodyguards. It was very rare for him to bring along his maidservants. Therefore, the number of people who had seen his maidservants could be counted on one's fingers. Now that such a group had appeared, their faces were beautiful, their figures were graceful. Every one of them was a great beauty. Just based on their faces, they were definitely above Jingwan. Moreover, their bearing, to be honest, wasn't bad. In terms of literary skills, they might even be better than Jingwan. While many men were pretending to be elegant, carrying the demeanor of a gentleman as they sized up, many women were also looking. However, after looking at them, their gazes fell on the pavilion, smiling with unclear intentions. So what if Jin Qinhuang respected his first wife? At most it was like this. There were so many enchanting beauties by his side, of all shapes and sizes. But then again, he was a noble descendant. To be able to respect his first wife was already not bad. Moreover, he was different from others. He didn't care about his reputation. With Laozi's support, even if he favored his concubines and destroyed his wife, no one would care. The higher the husband's status, the more dignified and virtuous the first wife had to be. She couldn't be enchanting, couldn't have her own personality, and couldn't take the initiative to seduce her husband. Otherwise, she wouldn't have the demeanor of a first wife and would lose face for her man. However, when she endured and did all these, she would most likely be disliked by her man for being dull, inflexible, and emotionless. Things were so laughable. How many women didn't go through this? Don't blame anyone. Even the bit of envy and jealousy towards Sun Yijia had faded by a lot. Sure enough, she couldn't compare with those who were better than herself. Only when she thought of those who weren't as good as herself, could her heart be balanced. Si Go and Fu, the 4 personal maidservants, followed by the ordinary palace-attired maidservants, stood far away outside the pavilion, their voices slightly raised. Greetings to master. Li Hongyuan's back was facing them, but Jingwan could clearly see them with her head tilted. In this pavilion, the one who could be addressed as Master Zhu, could it be her? He smiled and raised his chin at Li Hongyuan. His meaning was obvious. Li Hongyuan didn't move at all, as if he didn't know that there was a group of people outside. Most of the time, he really couldn't figure out what this person was thinking. Since he did not respond, the maidservants continued to maintain their greetings. After all, they were still carrying something in their hands. However, looking at these beauties, especially the 4 leaders, their movements were quite consistent, and their expressions were unusually calm. They were definitely well trained. Jingwan even felt that they might have practiced martial arts. After all, they were somewhat similar to Bai Xiao. This subject's daughter saw that they seemed to have brought a lot of delicious food. Does your highness not plan to let this subject's daughter have a taste? Having something to do, even if it was just eating and drinking, was better than just sitting there doing nothing. Although sitting like this was not particularly uncomfortable, this bastard's words were too perverted. If she did not distract herself a little, she really did not know when she would lose control, and lose her self-control, and directly go against her superior and beat him up. There were a lot of marks on her body, but there were also a lot of wounds on his body. When Li Hongyuan heard this, he raised his hand. The beauties obediently got up and walked gracefully into the pavilion. Once again, they paid their respects, but this time, the person they paid their respects to was the 3rd young miss of the Luo family. Jingwan slightly raised her eyebrows and calmly accepted it. These beauties' movements were nimble. A chessboard was placed on the table between the 2 of them. The white pieces were on the right side of Jingwan, while the black pieces were on the right side of Li Hongyuan. On both sides, there were juicy fruits that looked exceptionally delicious. There was also tea. Jingwan guessed that the tea should be just right for her to drink. Another short table was set up on the side, and more processed fruits were placed on it. The whole process was silent, and they even lowered their eyes, not even glancing at each other. These servants do not know Miss Luo's taste. If you like to eat something, or if you don't like to eat something, just tell these servants. Perhaps Miss Luo is more accustomed to having her own people to serve her. It would be best to call Mama and Jiejian. Jingshi said softly. Her attitude was respectful, as if Jingwan was their master, and the real master, Li Hongyuan, was just an outsider. This scene, no matter how one looked at it, was a bit strange. Jingwan's expression did not change. She looked at the things that were within her reach. Not to mention the fruits, there were many varieties, and each one was only about 2 or 3 mouthfuls. Moreover, she was not very picky. The key point was that those snacks were only the size of a fingertip. Those were all things that she liked. They did not know her taste. Hee. They are all not bad. I've troubled you. Miss Luo is too much for these servants. These are all things that these servants should do. Even if they should do it, it would be after she married into Jin Qinhuang Fu. However, Jingwan did not say much. Li Hongyuan did not let them go out, so Jingwan naturally acquiesced to them staying. Does Wang Ye want to play a game of chess with this subject's daughter? However, this subject's level is very limited, probably only at the level of knowing. The emotions in Li Hongyuan's eyes were much lighter than when the two were together. It doesn't matter, it's just to pass the time. Even if you don't know, Ben Wang can teach you. Wan has always been intelligent. She will not be stumped by insignificant black and white pieces. Jingwan paused. Wang Ye, this subject's daughter, always feels that, no matter how intelligent a person is, there should be a place where they are weak. And no matter how intelligent a person is, they may have an extremely high talent in a certain aspect. Li Hongyuan hooked his lips into a smile. Then what exactly does Wan want to express to Ben Wang? TSK, he actually didn't directly say, Wan, you're referring to your chess skills being crippled. It turned out that Jin Qinhuang also had times of benevolence. This subject's daughter has not studied chess, and does not know how high her talent is. If she is too stupid, Wang Ye should not dislike her too much. Whether it's good or bad, it's just a plaything. If Wan likes it, then play a bit more. If you don't like it, then just put it aside. Everything was based on her preferences. Your bottomless indulgence, it's really not a problem. The game had already begun. When the number of pieces on the chessboard gradually increased, Li Hongyuan slowly explained to her. He was very meticulous and very patient. Every time he could place the pieces on those positions, he would accompany her to try it out step by step. Sometimes he would even go back a few steps and teach her another path. Jingwan learned seriously, and for the first time, she felt that playing chess was so interesting. As time went by, many people came and went. Later, one after another, there were princes who had not yet been crowned as kings, as well as adult princes, and their Wangfei who had finished their work. The age of these people was increasing. However, there wasn't a single person who didn't have eyes and came to the pavilion, including Prince Rui. Compared to coming to Li Hongyuan's place to be abused, it was naturally more important to get closer to those young talents. Therefore, even though they were not far apart, it was like two different worlds. Prince Rui looked at the pavilion. She actually wanted to invite Jingwan, but again and again, she couldn't get a chance to be alone with her. In fact, there were advantages to having more people, but Jingwan also didn't give her a chance to express her goodwill. Every time, she was always avoided by Jingwan. Then, not only her, even Prince Rui also found out that Li Hongyuan didn't want them to get close to Jingwan. Prince Rui was a bit unwilling to give up, but when he saw Li Hongyuan's face getting colder and colder, he could only give up. When it was almost time, they dispersed in 2s and 3s. The two people who didn't fit in also ended their chess game. Jingwan unknowingly ate a lot of food, but she didn't feel hungry at all. Then, she clapped her hands and left, leaving the mess to Li Hongyuan to clean up. Jingwan and Sunny Jia got on the same carriage. Seeing that she didn't seem very happy, "Sister-in-law, what's wrong? Your third brother's picture of a carp playing with a lotus was taken away by Prince Rui. That painting, I like it very much." Jingwan was silent. The other person had a high position, and was also shameless. If he wanted to leave, there was no way, but how about I ask Prince Jean to get it back? In any case, that scoundrel was even more shameless. Whatever he wanted, there was probably nothing that he couldn't get. Sun Yijia stared blankly, looking at Jingwan again. She already had a bit of ridicule. There's no need for that, but you and Prince Jean. Unfinished words couldn't be spoken, could only be understood. Jingwan didn't mind. It was just a game of chess, nothing shameful. Since it was a literary gathering, it naturally couldn't just revolve around one or two people. Jingwan didn't know, but Sun Yijia had seen many masterpieces of poetry. There were also some calligraphy and paintings that weren't lacking in top quality. Except for a few people who harbored such thoughts, most of the others were very satisfied. In fact, Sun Yijia was also very satisfied. Just like before they came to avoid the summer heat, Jingwan had said, show off one's husband. Today, she really did, intentionally or unintentionally, fiercely show off. It wasn't that she did anything, but Luo Jingbua unconsciously did a lot. Not to mention that he always carefully protected her. Even when he was painting, he would occasionally glance at her, as if he could only feel at ease when he saw her sitting steadily by his side. That posture wasn't fake. Moreover, even if someone deliberately faked it, they wouldn't be able to reach his level. Don't know how many married and unmarried women were jealous to death. Jingwan's misery couldn't heal the hurt in their hearts. That's right, I didn't see Yuan Fangfei today. It is said that she has already been sent to Prince Zhongfu. Jingwan's reaction was flat. In fact, she knew some things about Yuan Fangfei. It was quite miserable, but that was enough. In the future, it would have nothing to do with her. On the 5th day, they received the imperial decree to return to the capital. Every family began to pack up and set off 2 days later. On the way back, it was very peaceful. Perhaps they didn't want to stay any longer and cause more trouble. The journey was also a lot faster. Compared to when they came, they used 1 day less to reach the capital. https://11/11807/66532669. Chapter 214. When the emperor returned to the capital, the officials naturally lined the road to greet him. Emperor Liqingdi was kind. He knew that the journey was tough, so he dispersed when it was about time. At the same time, the officials who had nothing important to do could go to the court in advance. In this way, the two heads of the Luo family returned. Except for those who couldn't go out, such as Luo Rongping, who was paralyzed in bed, and little Wang, who was in confinement, everyone else waited at the door. When they saw the two elders, Luo Rongwen led them to kneel and greet them back. Luo Peishan, on the other hand, was as elegant as ever, with a hint of indifference and a hint of calmness in his dignified manner. Most of the time, he had such a face, so it was not strange to see him like this. As for old Madame Luo, she was also wise and calm. She did not shed tears when she saw her son and grandson after 2 months of separation. One must know that when she brought Jingwan to the capital, she did not show much emotion even after a few years of not seeing her. Everyone was also used to the two elders only treating Jingwan as a treasure. They were all in the state of grass. Now, no one in the Luo family really cared about this. More or less, they hid it in their hearts and didn't show any clues. They wouldn't do anything they shouldn't do. It was purely looking for death. In addition, they weren't mistreated by the Luo family. It was unnecessary and not worth it. The 3 girls who were married were the best witnesses. Needless to say, the eldest girl had a stable position in her husband's family and was flattered more and more. Jingwan didn't shortchange her of the benefits that the women of the Luo family should have. Naturally, she also knew a lot of things from her mother. How could she have evil thoughts? As for the second girl, although she was a concubine's daughter, she was also considered to have married into a lower family. She was backed by the big tree of the Ministry of Official Personnel Affairs, and didn't have a bad relationship with her family. Luo Peishan also gave her husband's family a certain amount of support. Even if she didn't have children for a few years, her back was straight and upright. As for the fourth girl, she was a troublemaker all day long. Many people didn't like her. Now she was a despised concubine. Even if she was in the prince's mansion, no one in the Luo family knew that she was pregnant. Even if they knew, no one cared. Her own mother even abandoned her. She fell to this point. The biggest factor was her own status. The worst relationship with Jingwan was one disaster after another. After entering the gate, Luo Peishan waved his hand to disperse everyone and let them do what they should do. Jingwan was a little dispirited now. She pushed her sister-in-law, who was more energetic than her, out to deal with her mother. Anyway, the child in her belly was Madame Zhang's grandchild. When they left, Madame Zhang didn't know. Later, she found out from the letter, and probably had been longing for it for a long time. Now, she could see the truth and be happy. Begonia House was a place that she was already familiar with. Even if she came back with Jingwan, her personal maids went back first. With the help of the little maids, everything was prepared. After bathing and changing clothes, Jingwan ate a little something to fill her stomach. Then she went to sleep comfortably. When she woke up, she would probably be revived with full health. After waking up, Jingwan was indeed revived with full health. However, her mood was actually not so good. After waking up in their own territory, they saw a weak and soft girl with timid eyes who seemed to be frightened by the slightest movement. You just looked at her, and she looked like she was about to cry. There was probably no creature in the world more annoying than this. Cousin, she looked at you with watery eyes. Which family did this strange relative come out of? Jingwan sat down and looked at the maid beside her. What's going on? Miss, this cousin is the child of your aunt's family. They just came to the capital and haven't settled down yet. For the time being, they are guests in the Fu. Qingzhu replied. When Jingwan was resting, the maids naturally had to find out what had happened during her absence. Jingwan had only seen the so-called aunt once when she was young. However, it left a deep impression on her because Jingwan lowered her head and took a sip of tea. She hadn't seen this cousin even once. She didn't know that she was a real little white flower with a black heart. I should be the one to see aunt and cousin. No. The little white flower's face was red, and she looked like she was about to cry. I'm a little tired now. I'll go see aunt later. Cousin, you can go back first. Jingwan directly asked her to leave. The little white flower was even more anxious. Cousin. She saw the coldness on Jingwan's face and knew what was good for her. Then I'll go back first. When she turned around, the golden beads slid down her palm-sized face. Jingwan's face was cold. People like her only had 2 words left in her heart. Damn it. If she walked out looking like this, people would most likely think that she was severely bullied by Jingwan. If she wasn't black-hearted, then she was naturally black-hearted. It would be strange if people liked this kind of person. And people who liked this kind of person must have holes in their brains. Every hole was filled with water. Jingwan wasn't the only one who was black-hearted. Everyone around her was black-hearted. Wasn't that clearly tarnishing the girl's reputation? This was intolerable. Jingwan waved her hand. This kind of person will only cry harder if you do anything to her. Don't worry about it. Those who were fooled by this kind of person were pure idiots. There was no need to argue with an idiot. Who came to aunt's house? Just this girl, your aunt, uncle, and their child. Oh right, there's also your aunt's younger sister-in-law. That person's age is similar to this girl. Qingzhu said. Similar to her niece's age. Then she must have had a daughter at an old age. She just didn't know if she was born from a second wife like Wan Fangfei, or an old clam giving birth to a pearl. It was unlikely that she was a concubine's daughter. Her uncle was the eldest son. No matter how much his father doted on a concubine's younger sister, there was no reason for him to keep her by his side. Jingwan saw Qingzhu's strange expression. Why? Is there something wrong? Miss, your aunt's younger sister-in-law is short-sighted. I heard that she has only been in the Luo family for a few days, but she has already taken away a lot of things from Madame. Moreover, as soon as we entered the courtyard, she went to third young master's courtyard. Jingwan sneered. In the Luo family, who else could it be but her sister-in-law? She had already inquired about it. However, if it was her sister-in-law who could take things away from her mother so easily, it wouldn't be so easy for her sister-in-law. Alright, there's one more thing. Hong Lian has also become a bed warmer. Hearing this, Jingwan's face turned stern, and she directly smashed the cup. This was the first time that Jingwan had smashed something since she was born. It could be seen that she was really angry. Hong Lian was one of the handmaidens that Duchess Ding had prepared for her third brother. Together with Lu Yi, she had asked her to be a servant girl to burn the fire and clean the courtyard. Now, after only 2 months, she had actually climbed into her father's bed. She was indeed too benevolent. Help me dress up. Jingwan changed her clothes and dressed up meticulously. That's right, she was preparing to step on someone. When she went to Luomei residence, Jingwan was still outside the door. The servant girl guarding the door was about to go in and report, but she stopped her. Younger sister, I'm not criticizing you, but our family's servant girl Lian was born delicate and weak. How could my niece have the heart to bully her? In terms of seniority, Lian is her older cousin. Moreover, in the future, they will be living under the same roof. She's like this. She had been wiping her tears as she spoke, but now she was sobbing uncontrollably. Mother, younger cousin didn't. A certain girl called Lian also sobbed weakly. Jingwan didn't feel anything about this scene, but the words living under the same roof spun on the tip of her tongue. Older sister, Lian grew up in the palm of my hand. In my eyes, she's just like my own daughter. How can she be Jingbua's concubine? Madame Zhang said weakly with a troubled expression. Our Lian brings fortune to her husband and family. She can marry into any family. Older sister, don't you want to keep the goodies within the family? I also know that you treat her as your own daughter, so you're assured to marry her to Jingbua. Speaking of which, Jingbua is just a virgin now. Lian has indeed suffered. Since younger sister also thinks so, why don't you promote Lian to a second wife? Although her status is a little lower, younger sister, and Jingbua definitely won't be lacking in anything. Madame Zhang was speechless. She looked at her daughter-in-law who was sitting quietly and felt very sorry for her. However, she really wasn't good at facing this kind of situation. Didn't she already send someone to call Jingbua? Why wasn't he here yet? Younger sister, why are you standing at the door and not going in? Jingwan turned around. Her father and brother were together. Her gaze swept over them indifferently. Father, third brother, I was just about to go in. It's good that you're here. Everything could be resolved at the same time. Luo Rongyan felt that his daughter's gaze was a little frightening. However, when he thought about how he had slept with her maidservant in her courtyard, his old face turned slightly red. He clearly knew that she hated concubines the most, but this time, he actually touched her head. It seemed that any reaction from her was not surprising. He subconsciously revealed a fawning smile. His appearance was not bad. He had a clear temperament, and the lethality of his smile was not small. Unfortunately, Jingwan was indifferent. Now she even had a bad impression of her father. She even stepped into the room ahead of them. She clearly saw her mother breathe a sigh of relief. The pair of mother and daughter with red eyes had a bit of shyness on their faces. There was also a girl sitting at the side peacefully stroking her belly. When she saw Jingwan come in, she raised her head and chuckled. There was also a girl whose eyes were restless and itching to stick to her body. Jingwan just stood there. She didn't even greet them. Her gaze fell on a maidservant with a woman's hair in a bun. Her eyes were like small hooks, but at this moment, there was a bit of fear in them. Servants, drag this lowly maidservant out and beat her 50 times. If she dies, it will naturally be over. If she doesn't die, she will be sold as a guilty slave. It was the first time Jingwan gave such a command that could take someone's life. https://11/118076653271. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.